Ethan Cole rode his horse across the parched, barren land. Then he froze. In the middle of the empty sand flat stood a wooden beam, upright. An Apache woman was hanging from it, the rope tight around her neck, her feet just a few inches off the ground. Her body was streaked with blood, her hands tied behind her back, her black hair matted and tangled. Her legs twitched ever so slightly, a sign that life was slipping away. Ethan jumped off his horse. Without hesitation, he drew his Bowie knife and slashed the rope. Her body dropped into his arms like a burning stone. Her breath was so faint, he had to press his ear to her chest to hear it. Her heart was still beating barely, but beating. He poured water into his palm and lifted her face. Her eyes opened deep, dark eyes, blazing not with gratitude, but with fury. She shoved his hand away, her voice hoarse, full of fire and the raw shame of what she had endured. "Are you trying to violate me?" Ethan froze. He said nothing. He just stared at the rope still swaying behind her like an accusation, like a whisper from death itself that had just been interrupted. He gently set her down, letting her rest against the wooden post. She tried to stand, but collapsed. He stepped forward, but she raised a hand to stop him, her gaze sharp as a blade. "I can stand on my own." She pushed herself up again, trembling but proud, then turned and walked off into the sunlight, leaving a trail of blood in the sand. Ethan watched her go. He did not follow. But he could not walk away, either. The wind swept through, covering her footprints with dust, and he knew. Their story began the moment she refused to be saved by him. The afternoon sun draped over the desert like a blazing red cloth, stretching all the way to the horizon. Heat shimmered off the sand, making the air ripple like boiling water. Ethan Cole pulled his hat lower, one hand gripping the reins, his eyes fixed on the Apache woman struggling to walk straight through the giant sea of fire. She staggered forward, the rope burn around her neck still deep and purple. Every breath she took felt like fire in her lungs. Each step left behind a drop of dark blood in the sand. But she kept walking like she had to outrun the very moment she had been saved. Ethan kept a distance of 30 paces. No closer. He did not want her to think he was chasing her. But he also knew, if he left now, in just a few more hours, the sun would kill her faster than the noose had tried to. She stumbled for the first time that afternoon. Her knees buckled, and her body pitched forward. Ethan stepped once, then stopped. She braced herself, tried to rise, fell again, a second time, a third. The fourth time, she slammed her hands into the sand, furious, desperate, and too proud to allow herself to be weak. Ethan took a deep breath, then quietly placed a water pouch and a piece of hard bread on a nearby rock. He did not touch her, did not say a single word. When she looked up, eyes red from the sun, he had already stepped back to the original distance. She stared at the water pouch like it might be a trap, but her lips were so dry they had cracked and bled. In the end, she reached out, took it, and drank in slow, careful sips. Ethan looked the other way, not out of shame but because he understood. Even the strongest people have moments they do not want anyone to witness. Dusk fell, and the desert wind grew stronger, carrying cold air down from the cliffs. She collapsed again. This time, she could not get back up. When Ethan approached, she still raised a hand to stop him. "Do not touch me." Her voice trembled, hoarse, but still burned with fire. He knelt beside her, far enough that his shadow would not touch hers. "You do not need to thank me," he said. "And you do not need to follow," she replied, eyes locked on his. "I know," he exhaled, "but I saw them hang you. If they come back, I will die alone." She cut him off. "Even death must be mine." Her words were sharper than any blade, and they left Ethan silent for a long time. As the air turned icy, he built a small fire beneath a large rock for her to keep warm. Then he walked away and set up his own camp, exactly 30 steps away. Just like during the day, night fell. In the darkness, only 2 small fires flickered, separated by a sea of sand and cold wind. 2 strangers, both exhausted, both broken, but neither willing to lean on the other. Before closing his eyes, Ethan looked at her fire dancing in the dark and whispered to himself, "If she is still alive tomorrow, I will keep walking 30 steps behind." That night, the desert was as cold as iron, but between the 2 fires, A thread-thin connection as fragile as smoke began to form, even as they both tried to deny it. The sun rose early, pouring down onto the desert in a blinding white light that cut like blades. The night had been so cold that dew clung to the sand, but within minutes, the heat made everything vanish into steam. Ethan Cole was up first. He snuffed out the fire with sand, then looked toward the other flame. The Apache woman, Taya, was still there. She had not slept. She did not lean against anything. She just sat upright, staring east, where the sun had just risen behind the red rock ridges. Her neck was still swollen, the dark bruising reaching all the way to her shoulder. But in the morning light, her face carried a strange kind of strength, as if life itself had refused to let go of her. She stood, staggered, but she managed to stay up. Ethan said nothing. He saddled the horse, then stepped back, keeping his distance exactly 30 paces. Taya began to walk. She did not look at him, did not say a word, but her steps today were steadier. By midday, the sun scorched so intensely that even shadows seemed like a luxury. Ahead of them, a steep rock wall rose up, with a narrow hollow at its base, just wide enough to block the sunday. Taya entered first, panting, and dropped onto the hot sand. Ethan stayed outside, hesitated, then stepped in, but only halfway. He set a water pouch down on the stone floor, then backed off. She glanced at him. Her gaze, no longer filled with complete hatred, softened now with just a hint of wary acceptance. Just a hint. "Sit," she said softly. "I am fine out here. The sun will kill you before it kills me." Ethan looked up at the mocking sun hanging in the sky. She was right. He stepped into the hollow and sat a few meters away from her. In the afternoon, when the desert winds picked up, they needed a fire to keep from freezing. Ethan pulled out his flint and tried to spark a flame. His hands trembled slightly. Too many sleepless nights, too many old wounds. Taya watched for a moment, then reached for the fire starter. 2 quick strikes, the fire sprang to life. He blinked, surprised. "You are better at this than I am. I have lived out here since I could walk," she said. They sat in silence, staring at the fire. Night was falling fast. The cold wind rushed down the canyon like the breath of darkness. Ethan handed her a small jar of ointment. "For the bruise on your neck, it will help with the pain." Taya hesitated, then took it, but did not use it right away. She looked at him, her voice hoarse but steady. "Why do you keep helping me?" Ethan replied without pause. "Because when I cut that rope yesterday, I saw life in your eyes, not surrender." She tilted her head, her dark eyes as deep as a lake. Then she opened the jar and gently applied the salve to the bruise on her neck. Her strong hands trembled slightly, but Ethan said nothing. He just sat there, watching the fire, as if guarding the silence she needed. After a while she exhaled. "Do not think saving me means I owe you. I never thought that." "Good," she said, her voice turning cold again. "Because I will never belong to anyone." Ethan pressed his lips together. He did not argue. He just looked out toward the faint path ahead in the darkness and quietly said, "Then I will just walk 30 steps behind you, to see how far you can go." That night, the fire burned longer. The wind howled harder. 2 people, one trying to keep distance, the other trying to break every connection, sat side by side like 2 stars destined to travel together. And out in the cold desert, the space between them began to shift, even if neither of them was ready to admit it. Sunset fell over the desert. The sky turned red and purple, while the sand glowed like scorched copper. Taya and Ethan sat across from each other in the narrow hollow, the fire flickering between them as if eavesdropping on a conversation neither of them was ready to have. Taya had been silent for a long time. She traced spirals in the sand with her fingertip, like she was trying to bury the memories boiling up in her chest. Ethan sat slightly to the side, cleaning his Bowie knife. He tried to keep his distance, but with every passing second, that distance grew harder to hold. It was she who broke the silence first. "Why were you there that day?" Ethan paused. The firelight reflected in his gray eyes deep. Tired. He sighed and looked into the flames like confessing to them. "I was looking for someone. Someone I lost. Because I did not get there in time." "Your wife?" Taya asked, not with curiosity, but with the kind of voice only someone who had lost something would use. "No, Ethan answered quietly. An Apache boy. Taya narrowed her eyes. Her hand clenched. Did you kill him? Ethan shook his head. I did not save him. I saw the village. Guerrillas had hung people. One by one. I was late by an hour. Just 1 hour. The cold wind whistled through the rocks, carrying a heavy silence with it. Taya looked at him for a long time, as if trying to see past his skin to find the truth buried underneath. So you saved me, to pay for that? I do not know, Ethan said, honest to the point of discomfort. Maybe I just could not watch someone else die right in front of me. She let out a dry laugh. Not from amusement, but from pain. So you need me to live, so you can feel better about yourself? Ethan flinched. That sentence cut straight to the softest part of him. No, he said, his voice low. I helped you. Because there was no surrender in your eyes. They hung you to kill you, but you still stared them down. I could not watch that look disappear. Taya bit her lip. Her dark eyes shimmered with something anger, yes, but also a kind of reluctant understanding. She turned slightly, letting the firelight fall across the bruised mark on her neck. They hung me because I loved the wrong person. Ethan froze. A white man, she said plainly. They called me a traitor, said my soul no longer belonged to the tribe. The wind seemed to stop. Two people, cast out by two different worlds for two different reasons, now sat in a narrow stone hollow in the middle of the desert like two rivers lost from their paths, meeting at the end of the earth. Ethan asked softly, "What about him?" Taya looked into the distance, her eyes darkening like ash. "He is dead, killed by people like you." Ethan wanted to say something, but "I'm sorry" did not feel right. Justifying it would be even worse. So in the end, he only whispered, "Taya, if I am the reason you hate, then let me also be the reason you live." She turned to face him, her eyes as stormy as a desert sandstorm at night. Not hatred, but something in between where two broken souls look up and see themselves reflected in the other. That night, in front of a small fire, two quiet confessions shrank the distance of 30 steps down to just a few breaths. I truly appreciate your being here. And if this story brought back memories of dusty afternoons and the sound of horse hooves echoing in your chest, then go ahead and subscribe to my channel, so that each day we can sit together again. And I will tell you another story from the West. The next morning, the sky was grayer than usual. Heavy lead, colored clouds crawled across the sky, signaling a storm not of weather, but of something growing quietly between two people still trying to hide their feelings. Taya stepped out of the rock hollow first, her shoulders tense, as if afraid the man behind her might read something off her back. Ethan packed up their things, tied everything neatly, and followed in silence. No words, no signals, they just walked together. But today, the distance was no longer 30 steps. Only 10, then 5, and at times, only the sound of each other's breath in the wind. By noon, the sun had eased up, and the wind shifted direction. Ethan pointed to a shallow dent in the sand. There is water. The desert still keeps something for those who know how to look. Taya knelt down and used her knife to dig through the thin layer of sand. Moments later, moist earth appeared. She looked at him, said nothing, but her gaze was no longer hostile. She took a few sips, then handed him the water pouch. Ethan reached for it, and his hand brushed the tips of her fingers. Just a touch, but it made them both pause. Neither spoke, but something had changed. That afternoon, while climbing a rocky slope to get a better view of their path, a strong gust of wind hit them. Taya lost her balance and slipped. Ethan moved faster than he could think. He grabbed her arm and yanked hard. Her body fell against his, close enough that he could feel her warm breath on his neck. She steadied herself, but did not pull away immediately. For a brief moment, they stood so close that one could hear the heartbeat of the other. Taya was the first to step back. "Do not think I need saving again," Ethan replied softly, without a smile or sarcasm, "but I will still reach out. Whether you take my hand is up to you." She turned away, but the corner of her mouth twitched, whether from anger, embarrassment, or something else. By nightfall, they found a larger hollow to shelter in. Ethan started a fire, while Taya checked the bruises on her neck and shoulder. He noticed a new dark mark on her upper arm and side. "Are you in pain?" "No," she said firmly. I have medicine. I can do it myself. But when she tried to reach behind her back, her arm could not get there. She stopped. Her other hand trembled slightly from strain. Ethan said nothing. Just stood up and walked toward her slowly, giving her time to step back if she wanted to. She did not. He gently took the jar from her hand and gestured. Let me. Taya turned her back. Ethan touched her skin, sun-warmed, strong, but trembling from pain and cold. He applied the ointment slowly, carefully, avoiding the deepest bruises. Neither of them said a word. The air was thick, like night fog. When he finished, Taya pulled the cloth back over her shoulders, but stayed facing away. She did not step aside like she had every night before. Her voice came low, almost a whisper. You do not know who I am. You should have let me die back there. Ethan replied without hesitation. I know you are alive. That is enough. Taya closed her eyes. In that moment, both her pride and her hatred fell strangely silent. That night, they sat closer to the fire, not face to face, but not far apart either. Just close enough for one person's warmth to reach the other through the shifting wind. And for the first time, Taya fell asleep without lighting a separate fire. As for Ethan, he lay in the dark, listening to her steady breathing, and knew the distance between them no longer belonged to the desert. That night, the desert clung to the heat left over from the day. The moon split the sky into a quiet silver path, shining down on two figures sitting by a small fire no longer 30 steps apart, no longer 10, just an arm's reach away. Taya woke up first. She turned and saw Ethan leaning against the rock wall, eyes still open, hand resting on the grip of his gun. You are not sleeping? Too scared. What if you disappear in the middle of the night? He said, half joking, half serious. Taya looked away, but at the corner of her mouth, something softened. At dawn, they left the rock shelter. The air between them had changed, no longer tense, no longer cold. They walked side by side, sometimes with their shoulders nearly touching. Taya asked quietly, Are you really not afraid of me? Ethan gave a small smile. If you wanted to kill me, you would have done it on the first day. She looked at him longer than usual with eyes that no one could quite read, a little wary, a little grateful, and something else neither of them could name. By midday, they reached a deep crevice cutting across their path. Ethan jumped down first, then turned and held out his hand to her. Taya stared at that hand for a few seconds. Before, she would have ignored it. But today, she placed her hand in his. When his large hand closed around her strong wrist, they both paused. No words. No need. That evening, they took shelter beneath a low stone overhang. The sky had no moon. The wind blew cold and sharp. Ethan lit the fire, while Taya sat a short distance away, but not as far as usual. For reasons he could not explain, his heart beat faster than normal. Tomorrow, Taya said softly, when the sun rises, I will leave. Ethan clenched his fists, trying to keep his voice calm. I know. She turned to look at him through the flickering firelight. You pulled me down from that noose, not to keep me. I do not owe you anything. I never said you did. But you followed me, protected me. Ethan opened his mouth, but no words came. The truth was too difficult to say, and maybe she already knew. At midnight, Taya picked up the water pouch and stepped out of the shelter. Ethan noticed instantly. He followed. She stood at the edge of a rocky slope, her back to him, black hair flying like torn strips of night in the wind. Taya! Ethan called out. Do not follow. I cannot. She turned around. The campfire light cast shadows on her cheekbones, on the bruises, on the rope marks around her neck. But in her eyes, there was no more hatred, only a strange fear, like she was afraid of something larger than the desert, larger than herself. Ethan stepped closer. When they stood face to face, separated by a single breath, Taya whispered, If you touch me, I will not stop you. Ethan could no longer hold the distance. He reached up and touched her cheek gently, like asking for permission. She did not step back. She did not push him away. Instead, her strong hands grabbed his shirt and pulled him down. And there, on the wind-swept ridge, they kissed, not the kiss of perfect love, but the kiss of two souls that had almost died, finding each other in a moment right before parting. The kiss of two people who both believed that by morning they would say goodbye. But that night, neither of them slept. Neither of them spoke again. There was only the scent of fire, the sound of wind, and the mingled breath between them, a confession left unspoken. Morning would come, and with it, the final choice. Dawn rose slowly, as if trying to delay the inevitable. The first rays of light slid over the edge of the rocks, shining on two figures still sitting back to back after a sleepless night. No words were spoken. Only silence, stretched tight like a bowstring ready to snap. Taya stood first. She tightened the strap on her water pouch, hiding the slight tremble in her hand. The cold morning wind brushed against her sun-darkened skin, exposing the bruises, the rope marks still etched into her neck. But her eyes, fierce, unbroken, looked as if last night's vulnerability had never happened. Ethan watched her from a distance. He did not call out, did not try to stop her. He only said, quietly, "If you leave, I will not follow." Taya paused, just for half a second, but it was enough to make his chest tighten. She turned slightly, her gaze dark. "Good, because I do not belong to you." Ethan nodded, but it felt like a boulder pressed against his ribs. They walked in different directions. Two sets of footprints in the sand parallel, then drifting apart. Ethan turned toward his horse. Taya headed toward the mountain range where her tribe once lived. Neither looked back. The wind swept through, slowly covering the prints with sand, erasing a story that never had the chance to begin. By midday, under a sun sharp as a blade, Ethan heard distant hoofbeats. Two riders crested a hill, heading in the same direction Taya had taken. He recognized the outfit's townsfolk from Dagger Falls, the same kind who had cheered when she was hung from that post. Ethan did not think. He spun around and kicked his horse forward, dust exploding beneath them like a storm. Taya heard the hooves, too. She turned. Two men were closing in. One of them laughed loud and cruel. "Well, look here. The Apache witch lives." Taya stepped back, hand reaching for her waist empty. No weapons, no strength. Only the sting of pride wounded too many times. She knew she could not outrun them. Not this time. One of the men rode closer, swinging a noose. And in that exact moment, Ethan burst through like an arrow cutting the wind. His horse crashed into the two riders, throwing one to the ground. Ethan leapt from the saddle, his fist crashing into the second man with such force that sand exploded around them. Taya stood frozen, not because she was weak, but because she never thought he would come back. Ethan was panting, sweat mixing with desert dust. He looked at her, no judgment, no question. "They do not get to touch you again." Taya gritted her teeth. "You did not have to do that." "I know," he said. "But I wanted to." For the first time, her gaze wavered. Not in anger, but in something that looked like fear of being cared for. They stood in silence for a long time. Wind passed between them, carrying the midday heat and something unnamed. Finally, Taya spoke, her voice low. "Do not walk ahead, walk beside me." Ethan nodded. No smile, but his eyes softened softer than the desert had ever been. They walked forward, shoulder to shoulder, their shadows long on the golden sand. No more 30 steps. No more distance. And the greatest gap, the one between two guarded hearts, had begun to melt away in the quiet of the desert. Evening settled slowly, painting the desert in deep shades of copper red. They walked side by side, neither speaking, but their breaths moved in the same rhythm. The wind carried the scent of sun-baked earth and a hint of distant moisture, brushing gently over the rope scar on Taya's neck, over the old wounds on Ethan's arms, as if the desert itself was trying to soothe them both. As the sun dipped low, becoming a band of fire along the horizon, Taya stopped. Ahead of them, the desert ended, replaced by a small valley of cacti, sagebrush, and a narrow path leading toward Apache land. The glow of dusk lit her face, and her dark eyes seemed impossibly deep. "From here, you should not follow," she said. Ethan heard her voice and knew this moment was coming. "You want to return to the tribe?" "I have to," Taya replied, her voice unsteady. "They need to know I am still alive. And they need an explanation." Ethan asked nothing more. He knew too well what it meant to face the past. Taya drew a long breath, gathering courage. "You saved me. More than once. I just did not want to watch you die. But I did die, she whispered. The day they hung me on that post. What you see is just a shell. Ethan shook his head, his voice steady, solid like the ground beneath them. No, I saw someone stronger than anyone I have ever met. Taya turned away, but not fast enough to hide the crack in her eyes. They made camp one last time on a flat stretch of stone. No words, no touch. But everything felt different, warm, deep, slow. Like an invisible thread between them had finally pulled taut after days of quiet tension. When full night fell, Taya sat close to the fire, her broad shoulders casting long shadows on the rock wall. Light shimmered on the wounds across her body like pieces of a broken moon. Ethan sat a few steps away. At last, it was Taya who broke the silence. Why do you keep that distance, even now, when I no longer push you away? Ethan stared into the flames. Because if I come too close, I will not be able to leave. Taya let out a sad laugh, the first one that did not sound like a blade. I'm afraid of that. Afraid of what? Afraid that I might want you to stay. Ethan looked up, and when the firelight danced in her dark eyes, he knew this was a moment that would follow him for the rest of his life. He stepped closer this time, without hesitation. Taya did not pull away. She only drew a sharp breath, like bracing for a blow. But when his hand touched her strong back, her body trembled in a different way. Not from pain, not from resistance, but like someone who had gone too long without being touched with care. Ethan whispered, "You belong where your heart chooses, not where others demand you return." Tears, the kind she had sworn never to shed in front of a man, slid down in silence. Taya leaned her forehead against his chest. If I go, will you blame me? No. If I stay, will you try to keep me? Ethan took her hand and pressed it to his heart. I will not keep you, but I will walk beside you. Taya closed her eyes, her breathing slowed. In that moment, she was no longer a prisoner of the desert, no longer the Apache witch hung in shame. She was simply a woman who had found a quiet place to rest for the first time in her life. When morning came, no goodbyes were said. None were needed. Taya faced the direction of her people. Ethan stood behind her, not too close, but not walking away. She took one step, then paused. The wind tossed her hair, carrying her voice like a whisper in the breeze. Ethan, will you walk with me for a while? He smiled, one of those rare smiles, warm like early summer sunlight. For a while? For a while, she repeated, and they walked on, shoulder to shoulder, toward a path that might divide their fates, or perhaps weave them together. And for the first time in a long time, the desert did not feel so cruel. My friends, love in the Wild West does not come from pretty words or promises. It is built in the footsteps taken side by side, through hot winds and cold nights. It is the courage to reach for another soul, and the strength to let them choose their own path. In this land of dust and ruin, love becomes a shelter, a reason for two hearts to keep on living. In the end, I only hope you find peace and happiness. I love you all. Dear audience of Wild West storytelling, let me know what you thought about this story. Leave a comment below. Press the number 8 if you liked it. And do not forget to subscribe for more powerful stories from the Wild West.